Hi, thank you so much. It's Easy University of Toronto, so we usually start 10 after. So supposedly you have 3 more minutes, but I'll start now. It's a great pleasure to introduce my great friend, Ron Boschma, who is one of the world's most prominent economic geographer and is a professor, if I count correctly, at Utrecht, Stavanger, and has the UNESCO chair in Toulouse. He won more awards that I can even count, unless you have until tomorrow. Is, what do we say? A very nice person, right? That's what you paid me for? Yes. A very nice person who also likes football, the real football. So all is well. I'm Dan Bresnitz, and I will be co-director together with David Wolf, who is there, of the Innovation Policy Lab and our host for this event. And after Ron will enlighten you, we will sit there and I will moderate your questions. And Ron, welcome to Toronto.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the nice introduction, and of course for the invitation. It's very nice to be here, and the weather is also fantastic. So, well, not today, but yesterday and the day before. So yeah, very pleased to be here. Thanks all for coming. What I would like to do is the following. I saw when coming here that there was another title of my presentation, and I'm sure I've communicated that to Dan before, but I forgot about that one. So now I have another title, but I will talk a bit about regional development trap, which was the original idea to present here. But I thought I would make it a bit broader than that and think a bit out loud about evidence-based regional innovation policy. I think it's on the minds of many of us how to think about what type of policy makes sense and to what extent we can develop effective policy to enhance innovations in regions. So that will be my topic. It will largely build on my own empirical work on this. I just put together a lot of work in just one presentation. The reason why I'm very much interested in regional innovation policy, because I do quite a lot of work for the European Commission. They have a smart specialization, they call it smart specialization policy. It's actually a regional innovation policy. It's already there since 2014. And it's a massive policy program. Billions of euros are actually spent on that. Even in Europe, I don't think that many people know about smart specialization strategy. But it's at least, as far as I know, it's one of the most massive intervention programs by a government to enhance policy innovation in regions. So as I said, since 2014, so we have programming periods in Europe, right? So there's one from 2014 to 2020. At that period, it was started to be implemented. All European regions had to come up with ideas about how to enhance innovation in their regions. And they had to think about what would be their future, right? In terms of economic activities they would like to develop and how to do that. And they asked for funding. There are about 230, a bit more than that, 230 smart specialization strategies. So it's also a very rich source of information of what those smart specialization policies actually are about and what regions actually do and in what direction they would like to go. To me, if I just have to put in a nutshell what smart specialization policy is about, is well, the main objective is to move into new directions, right? So it's either to move into new economic activities in their regions, or they want to upgrade their existing activities. And when they do so, it's not just about what has been referred to as blind diversification, right? So that you really want to move into something new, but you really have to think about what type of priorities might actually make sense in the context that a region is based. And what you should account for is the type of capabilities that are present in the region. It's actually formulated like that in smart specialization policy, that if you submit a proposal to the European Union, you really have to specify not only what type of activities you want to promote, but to what extent that also is in line with the existing capabilities that are present in the region. So you have to make a selection. You have to set priorities. So in a way, it's kind of active industrial policy at the regional scale. But you really have to think about which activities you really have to prioritize. That also means that if you build on existing capabilities in a region, that all regions differ to a smaller or larger extent. That means that it automatically is a no one-size-fits-all policy, right? Because some regions might have capabilities in AI, while many other regions might not have those. The same for biotech or for green. You really have to make choices. So it also means if you go really through those smart specialization strategies, that in terms of their focus of the activities they would like to promote, regions differ to some extent. And that is also the whole philosophy behind smart specialization policy. Also part of that, and I will come back to that also later in my talk, is that they have to exploit collaborations they might want to develop with other regions in order to promote the activities they have prioritized in their smart specialization strategies. So it's not only to look at the capabilities that are available in the region themselves, but it's also about making connections to other regions in order to get access to capabilities that you might not have, and therefore you might better collaborate with others in order to promote the activities that you have prioritized. So and this is also very much about Europe and about European integration in order to make connections across regions in Europe. And last, just one slide about smart specialization strategy. Sorry for that, but it's also about involving local stakeholders in developing smart specialization strategy. So it's not some kind of top-down model that has been applied and implemented, but it's really up to local stakeholders to connect to each other, to connect to regional policymakers, and then think about on what future direction they want to go. So it's a bottom-up process. It's a decentralized policy approach in which local stakeholders come together and think about the future of their region. And that should be somehow reflected in the smart specialization strategy. This has also been referred to in more technical terms, the entrepreneurial discovery process, right? So for the insiders. Now, okay. So let's go a bit through those building blocks of smart specialization strategies. And as I said before, local capabilities are one of the crucial ingredients of this smart specialization policy. So what we know from literature, and I've been involved myself a lot in this type of research, is that if you are going to think about what are your diversification opportunities, what are high potential activities that you would like to promote in your own regions, then we know that new activities do not start from scratch. They build on existing capabilities, and capabilities might refer to as certain sets of knowledge or types of skills or types of institutions that might be available. And what is important in this case is that those local capabilities condition which new activities will be more feasible to develop in a region, right? As I said, a region might have strong capabilities in AI, and therefore it would make absolutely sense to prioritize those in their smart specialization strategies. But many regions might actually lack those capabilities, and therefore it might be better not to focus on those in your smart specialization strategies. So in a way, local capabilities provide opportunities, but they set also limits to what can be achieved in this diversification process. You cannot just diversify into anything. It's just it depends very much on the capabilities that are at your disposal at the regional scale. And this has been referred to as the principle of relatedness. I won't go too much into that, but actually what it is saying is that the more related a new activity is to existing activities in a region, the lower the cost to develop those new activities in a region, right? Again, going back to this example of AI, when you already have strong capabilities in AI, to move into the new technologies in AI, you don't have to make that much cost in order to develop those. Well, regions that lack those capabilities, they will face a super high cost, and it will be almost impossible for them to excel in AI in the future, just because the relevant capabilities are missing. Now, if you follow that, and this is very much in line with smart specialization strategy, you can do really do some nice empirical stuff. I was thinking about should I really go into technical details about how to measure that, and I decided not to. But if you have questions about that, please let me know, and I can explain more in detail how we actually do that. But so here I just have a map. It was an assignment by the European Commission, and they were interested in the twin transition, right? The digital and the green transition. And I wanted to know to what extent regions have actually the capabilities to contribute to the new digital technologies of the future. And we use this type of approach in order to actually calculate that. So here what we did is we aggregated all digital technologies. Here I'm talking about 5 or 6G, Internet of Things, AI, all of those digital technologies. We just put them all together. And then we were looking into the data, what type of relevant capabilities are actually needed to move into those digital technologies. And we used the relatedness argument to underpin that. And here you have a map, and you can actually see that some regions in Europe have strong capabilities to go into digital technologies, while other regions might have very little or no capabilities whatsoever. So it really matters where you are in Europe, and this is very much in line with smart specialization strategy, right? You have to think about what capabilities do you have at your disposal, and in this case, can you really contribute to the digital transition in terms of the latest technology development in those digital technologies? So I'm not talking about application, I'm talking about the development of digital technologies, right? Which regions can we expect can really contribute to that next generation of digital technologies in that sense. You can actually see, I mean, you can of course go into this map and see, I mean, especially the south of the UK. Bayern, of course, is a powerhouse, digital powerhouse. There are some regions in France, but I don't want to go too much into detail, but just to make the point that there are huge differences across regions in Europe, and therefore you have to account for that. Yeah, you can use this approach for any activity you might be interested in, right? You Here it was again on the twin transition. So you had digital transition and the green transition. Here you go into all kinds of green technologies. So it's circular economy. There's even nuclear energy, because some people say that it's a green technology. Well, others say, well, maybe not. But okay, so there's solar cells, wind energy, all of that. It's all included here. And you can actually see it's a very different map. Right, so some regions have very strong capabilities to promote green, while other regions might have little or no capabilities to do so. And well, if you want to support digital and green, you want to really go into the twin transition, then from a Brussels perspective, you might think about where should we make those investments. And maybe you should select those regions that have the best opportunities to do so. So this could be helpful in informing policymakers where to focus investments, and maybe also to say to some regions, hey, you might better not go into that. You might have other strengths, you might have other capabilities, and maybe you should focus on those. Again, very much in line with smart specialization strategy. Well, as I said, you can go really into detail. I mean, when you, for example, use patent data, we can differentiate between 250,000 technologies. So you can imagine how detailed information you can get. This is, for example, for hydrogen. Of course, many regions in Europe are interested in contributing to hydrogen activities because it is one of the main pillars of the green transition. And again, here you can see that there are huge differences across Europe in terms of the capabilities they can provide in order to make that happen. Now, so far I was talking about to what extent are there relevant capabilities present in a region to move into something new. Also, what we often tend to do is we also want to rank activities in terms of their complexity. And why we are interested in that is because if you are able to move into a very high complex activity, AI, for example, is very complex, then, of course, you can really reap economic benefits because you are only one of the few worldwide that have the right capabilities to move into that. And therefore, you have almost no competition. And therefore, if you're able to move in the most complex activities, you can really benefit from that, economically speaking. There are quite a lot of papers on that actually show that. There's a lot of econometric evidence that that is the case. So the more you're able to move into the most complex activities, the more you might benefit from that in terms of gross regional product growth or in terms of employment growth. So regional policymakers might be really interested also to include in their smart specialization strategies to promote more complex activities. Now, just a few words on what it actually means, complexity, or explain a bit about what it is, but how it has been measured. There's some famous work done by Hidalgo and Hausman, who are scholars in those days at MIT and Harvard, and they developed this economic complexity indicator. And actually, they accounted for two dimensions, right? Because the big question is, how do you rank activities in terms of their complexity? One indication that an activity is more complex is that when you find in a global data set, for example, that an activity is only produced in very few regions, right? That were able to build a comparative regional advantage, right? That have developed a specialization in that particular activity. If only one or two regions worldwide have specialized in a particular activity, it might give a first indication that that is probably very complex to do, right? And then the second dimension in this indicator is that a very complex activity is combining many different capabilities, right? So that's one of the reasons why AI is very complex, because it is just not a matter of combining one or two capabilities, but you need many capabilities to come together and combine those before you can really excel in AI. So those are the two dimensions that are actually being used in this complexity indicator. And then we have two dimensions, right? So we have, let's say, the relevant capabilities, the relatedness dimension, and you have the complexity dimension. And then you can make this nice graph. So this is, I will explain. I will guide you through this this slide. So you see Ile-de-France. Ile-de-France, right? That is the Paris region. And you see on the x-axis, you see relatedness density, and on the y-axis complexity. And you see nodes in this graph. And each node stands for an industry, right? So on the top right, you see computer programming, consultancy, and related activities. That's one industry. And we have about, well, yeah, that's a good question. I think about 150 industries. So what you can actually see here, that each node scores high or low on relatedness density or scores high or low on complexity. Now, relatedness density represents these relevant capabilities. Do you have relevant capabilities in computer programming, consultancy, and related activities? The more you go to the right, the more you have relevant capabilities in order to promote that activity. So Ile-de-France has really many relevant capabilities to move into computer programming, consultancy, and related activity. And it's also super complex, right? Because it scores very high on the complexity indicator. Now you can actually see is that there is a positive relationship between the two variables, meaning that Ile-de-France has most relevant capabilities in the most complex activities. And that means, and that implies that Ile-de-France is one of the richest regions of Europe, because it has many diversification opportunities to go into the most complex activities from which you can benefit most economically speaking. Well, it has only very few relevant capabilities, for example, in manufacture of food product, but that's a low complex activity. So why would Ile-de-France care about developing that, right? It does not really bring too much economic benefits to the region. It's better to focus on the most complex ones. And Ile-de-France has developed capabilities in the past that allow them to move in the most complex industries. And that's why Ile-de-France is one of the richest regions in Europe, because it has this tremendous capacity to do so. Now, we go to another region. This is Silesia region. It's a Polish region, an old industrial region, coal mining region, steel region. And as we know, many old industrial regions are struggling. Their principal industries are in the process of decline. And they really have to think about, okay, as they will put forward in their smart specialization strategies, how to move forward, how to compensate for this process of decline in our local economies. Here we have the exact data set that we actually use, again, on industries. And now you can actually see there is a negative relationship between relatedness density and complexity. So, yes, Silesia has some potential to move into some industries, but there are the least complex ones. Well, for the most complex ones, so again, the sector computer programming, consultancy, and related activities, it hardly has any relevant capabilities in order to move into that. So it's very unlikely that it will ever develop those. And therefore, it would not be very good to be included in their smart specialization strategy. And this is the fate of many old industrial regions in Europe. So they have opportunities to move into new economic activities, but only in the least complex ones. And that is just because of their history, the type of capabilities that they have accumulated in the past, Again, they provide opportunities, but here they set also limits to what you can achieve in this diversification process. And here there are severe constraints in Silesia to move into the most complex ones, right? There is no complex industry in which they have relevant capabilities. So they should think about, well, yeah, maybe we could still focus on a number of activities in which we have relevant capabilities. That might not be the most complex one, but that's all we can do because that is, they are constrained by their own history. Other region, Extremadura region, the Spanish region, peripheral regions, one of the poorest, if not the poorest, no, it's not the poorest, but one of the poorest regions in Europe. Now, the relatedness density measure has a maximum value of 100. So you can actually see that almost all industries, they have hardly any relevant capabilities, right? And this is the fate of a peripheral region. They don't really have very relevant capabilities to move into anything. And that's a problem. And that's why Extremadura region is a poor region, because it has no opportunities, has no many diversification opportunities. I'm not even talking about whether that is a low or a high complex activity. They have hardly any diversification opportunities, even not in very low complex activities. So somehow that should be reflected in their smart specialization strategy. And this, of course, is a very wicked problem for many peripheral regions, because if we do this type of analysis in many parts of the world, we actually get those outcomes. Now, so I already said something about the fact that the capabilities provide opportunities, but they set also limits. And maybe here, going back to the Île-de-France region, you remember, it's a very dynamic economy because they have many capabilities to move into the most complex one. So they're not being trapped in anything. And what we have been, we refer to those regions as that they are in a complexity loop. They score high on average relatedness density, and they score high on average complexity. So those are the most dynamic regions, and many of them are capital regions in Europe, right? So I will just show a map of those, but I just want to go through this typology. Now, low complexity trap. You remember the Silesia region. It has some opportunities to move into new economic activities, but only in low complex activities, not in high complex activities. So they're stuck in a low complex economy. And it's really hard for them to get out of that because they don't have any relevant capabilities to move into a high complex activity, right? So they're stuck into that. Extremadura region, that's the structural trap. You have no capabilities whatsoever to move into anything, right? So you have a very low complex economy there, so they might still have some very simple agricultural activities or some tourism, but those sectors are of a very low complexity. And that's the fate of Extremadura. So they're caught in a structural trap, not having many diversification opportunities. Now, we also have a category there on the top left quadrant, which is the low relatedness trap. And this is an interesting one. Because it is an economy, a local economy that has, on average, a high complex economy. So they have been capable of moving into high complex activities, but they have hardly any relevant capabilities to move into something else. So basically, their high complex activities are kind of islands in the region because the capabilities that those high complex activities represent are of no use, of no relevance to move into something else. The region that I work now and then is the region of Toulouse, and Toulouse is very well known for Airbus, right? So it's aircraft making. So highly complex industry, but it has almost no spillovers to the local economy, because the capabilities that you need to excel in aircraft are of any use of relevance to any other activity that is present in the region. So there are no spillovers from aircraft making, from Airbus, to other activities in the region. So they're caught in this, what we refer to as low related strap, is a very bad term. We have a lack of fantasy or creativity to come up with something more. But that's... And now it's very interesting to see. Let's start with this is the map of Europe, and we have here are the 4 quadrants, right? So the structural trap, right? The Extremadura regions, right? So that have very little opportunities to diversify. You can see that parts of south of Italy, but especially Eastern Europe. Romania, some parts of Bulgaria, some parts of Greece, some parts of Poland. Those regions are caught in this kind of structural trap. Complexity loop, right? The dynamic regions like Île-de-France, like the Paris region, so it's blue, right? So you see Île-de-France is blue over there, but also many regions actually in Germany are in this complexity loop to a smaller or larger extent. Some regions in Sweden, some regions in my own country, in the Netherlands, etc., etc. So northern Italy, Spain, bit what you would expect, right? The Basque Country, Madrid, and Catalonia, Barcelona region. So they're in this complexity loop. Then you have those in the low complexity trap, right? This is the Silesia region, right? So yeah, they have opportunities, but only in low complex activities. Large parts of Spain, parts of Italy, parts of Eastern Europe, and then there is this interesting case from the low related strap, right? That I said before. This Toulouse example of Airbus having some high complex activities, but there are islands in the region. And you can actually see that almost the whole of France is trapped in that, which is already something quite remarkable. Some German regions as well, but mainly in France. So this is also something to think about. What is going on in France, right? So they're apparently very good in developing some centers of excellence in the region, but they're completely disconnected from any other activity in the region, right? So and that is quite a remarkable feature of the French economy. Okay, where? Okay, I hope you're still with me. You are? All right. At least some people say yes. That's very good. Okay, so now what I've done so far is I looked at what set of capabilities are present in a region, and do they provide you with opportunities or not to move into other activities in which those regions might not yet be specialized, right? But we also know that regions are not isolated entities. They interact and they connect with other regions, right? They trade, there's labor mobility, there's migration, there are global value chains, etc., etc. So we have to take that into account. And as you remember, when I was presenting the first slide on smart specialization strategy, you also have to make explicit in your smart specialization strategy with whom you're going to collaborate in order to promote the activities that you prioritize in your smart specialization strategy. So you have to make that very explicit. Now, if we look at those smart specialization strategies, we can actually see that that regions are actually struggling with that. With whom should I collaborate, right? So, well, maybe I know somebody elsewhere in another region or a far family member, etc., etc., and that's why we make connection. Of course, that is not the reason why you should connect. It should be useful in order to promote the priorities that you have set in your smart specialization strategy. So how to find the right collaboration partners? That's a big question. Now we know from empirical studies that just being connected to other regions does not really have a positive effect on regional diversification. It's not just that you have to expose to the outside world, but it matters to whom you connect and to which region you connect in order to have an effect on regional diversification. And we dub that as you need to develop so-called complementary linkages. What are complementary linkages? So you should connect to those regions. So, okay, let me give you just a simple example. So you might have some, as a region, let's say Ile-de-France, Paris region. They do have some capabilities in AI. They want to promote that in the smart specialization strategy, but they don't have all capabilities that you need to excel in AI. So you might want to connect to those regions that have that can give you access to those capabilities that are missing in Ile-de-France, but that you need in order to promote AI in Ile-de-France. So you're really going to fine-tune with whom you're going to collaborate. You really look at which regions could be useful and relevant for you to connect to. So those are what we refer to as complementary linkages. Again, if you want to know about the method behind it, I'm very happy to explain that. But let me just give an example. Here is a map of Europe, and I put in black Ile-de-France region, right, the Paris region. And this is about hydrogen. You remember the map that I showed before. Here are the relevant capabilities in each region in Europe in order to move into hydrogen. And you can see Ile-de-France, it has some capabilities, but not too much, right? It is not really dark colored in this graph. Now, okay, so now Ile-de-France said, but I still want to develop this in my smart specialization strategy, and I'm going to collaborate, right? I want to connect to those regions that can actually mean something to me. So using this indicator, we can actually map those. So actually we presented this in France, and France is heavily investing in hydrogen. And Macron was very happy about this result. He said, oh, yeah, I don't have to collaborate with the Germans, right? So I can just collaborate with other French regions, because you can actually see there are quite a few French regions that can really offer something to Ile-de-France. So you can make just a French program, and Macron was very happy about that, and is investing in fact billions of euros in that program. Now you can do this for every region, for every technology, for any activity that you're interested in, right? So I think it's pretty powerful. As I said, when we use pattern data, we can distinguish between 250,000 technologies. So we can, and we have about 280 regions, so we can make 250,000 multiplied by 280. We can make that many maps, right? So just to give the richness of the information that could be used in order to identify where are complementarities elsewhere in Europe. Now this is theory, right? And this is, of course, we use data. So so we are saying to Ile-de-France, you should connect to those that have the best complementary capabilities. So the ones that are missing in Ile-de-France region, that are available elsewhere, and that Ile-de-France need to move into hydrogen successfully. But they should connect, but do they actually collaborate with those that can mean most to them? That's the big question. And in Europe, we're doing a super poor job in that respect. And I just give you an illustration here. This is again a report we did for the European Commission. And now you see two maps. I can't move away from this microphone because there are people online that are, so they wouldn't hear me anymore. I first try it from a distance and let's see if it works. Okay, so look just at the left map. You can actually see that there are 3 lines departing from each region, right? So if you can see that more easily when you go to Finland, right? You see from each region there are 3 lines. What is showing here is, okay, and this is for digital technologies. So what we are, so for that Finnish region, we're going to determine what relevant capabilities does that Finnish region have, which capabilities are still missing that Finnish region need to move into digital technologies, and where are the best regions they should connect to that can offer them with the best complementary capabilities, right? So this tell you with whom they should collaborate. So, and I just put here the 3 highest potential collaborations. Now I use 2 colors in this map, a yellow color and a red color. The yellow color means collaborations between countries inside Europe, so international linkages. If the link is red colored, it means a collaboration inside a country. Now what is striking to see on this left side map is that all of the linkages are international, are yellow. So it means that all regions that want to go into digital technologies in Europe, they have to collaborate internationally because there are the best capabilities available for them in order to develop those digital technologies. So those are the ones they should collaborate with. And now there is the right-hand side map. This is what regions actually do in practice. Right, so again, the ones, so the Finnish region, you can see 3 lines again, and then these are the 3 strongest actual collaborations on digital technologies. And what you can see there is that the red lines dominate. So there is a strong national bias in actual collaborations on digital technologies in Europe. So regions collaborate, the Germans collaborate with the Germans, the French collaborated with the French, the Dutch collaborate with the Dutch, etc., etc. While what the left-hand map shows is that they should make international collaborations because there are the best complementarities available. And this, to me, is one of the tragedies of Europe, right? So the whole idea about the European Union is to integrate, to make to collaborate, to exploit opportunities that are available elsewhere in Europe, and we are not doing that, right? So we are. I also have a map for green technologies somewhere. Okay, I see something different here. Yeah. You can actually see that's even worse for green technologies. So we are complaining about the fact that the US is much better in AI and that China is catching up very rapidly and Europe is behind. And I think this is one of the reasons, right? We have the capabilities, but we are not exploiting those because we don't collaborate across national borders in Europe, and this is one of the reasons why we lag behind, right? And this is, I think, very telling. So here, smart specialization strategy is really about exploiting those complementarities. And if they have to think about and they have to identify collaboration partners and they are in search for the most relevant ones, they could use this type of work in order to identify those and then see to what extent they can actually establish collaborations with other countries in this smart specialization strategy. Here's just one example. It's just a fun project I was working on for the national government in the Netherlands, and I want to go into cybersecurity, right? So like any country nowadays. And first, my question was, do you have relevant capabilities? And I found out they don't really have those, right? So the Netherlands was really displeased with that. So they still want to go for it. Okay, there might be other reasons why they want to go for it. Safety issues, right? So you still want to be strong in cybersecurity, but just let's go back to what I was just talking about before. So here I have just two types of collaborations. This is the province of North Holland in the Netherlands, right? This is the region that I come from. I live in Amsterdam, so Amsterdam is part of North Holland. And I just identify the top partner regions of North Holland in cybersecurity, right? So you can see on the left side there are some top partners regions, and I just mentioned the number of technological collaborations in cybersecurity with those. So with of course North Holland is collaborating with North Holland, right? So you can that's always the case, right? That the most collaborations are inside their own region, and then there is a national bias, right? But I've also added a third column: how technologically relevant is the partner region? Does the partner region really provide complementary capabilities? Right? Are they really connecting to the right set of regions in that respect? Well, it has 9 collaborations with Lombardia, with Italy. Well, you could say, hey, this is nice. This is an international collaboration, but it is hardly any. So they already have those technologies in-house. Why collaborate with Lombardia? They could better collaborate with Ile-de-France, right? Which Ile-de-France can really add a lot of capabilities in cybersecurity to the province of North Holland in order to develop cybersecurity. So here you can make a list. So I put the green ones, which I think, yeah, those are the ones they should collaborate with. And then I have a column, do they actually collaborate with those regions, right? And of course, they're only collaborating with about 10 regions. So the regions that the top partner regions they should connect to are not even in this list, right? So you can do some really nice exercise. This is for technological collaboration. I did the same for scientific collaborations. With scientific collaborations, well, I'm working at a university. We do quite a good job, right? We tend to connect to the right partners. In this case, for North Holland. So Ile-de-France, Trento, North Brabant, they have really a lot to contribute in terms of scientific capabilities to North Holland that is missing in South Holland, but that you need to develop and excel in cybersecurity. So this is just a simple example how to use this and how you can actually apply this in particular cases. Now, so lots of untapped potential in interregional linkages. As I said, European regions actually do a very poor job in connecting to the right regions. So there are few linkages with other regions. If you connect to other regions, there's a strong national bias, and regions tend not to connect to regions that provide complementary capabilities. So there is so much untapped potential in Europe in that respect that is not currently being exploited. And smart specialization strategies should actually devote a lot of attention on that. Last part, can I say, do I still have some time, Dan? Yeah? Okay, how about institutions and policy? Of course, when you implement smart specialization policy, it depends very much in what type of institutional context you are actually doing. Do you have good or bad institutions? Do you really have good quality of governance? Because that might matter a lot. for the effectiveness of smart specialization strategies. Now, of course, we know from the literature, and there are a few experts here in the room that have actually done a lot of work on that, is that regional innovation policies actually do not evolve in isolation, but they actually unfold in a context where there are existing institutions and policies. So now, for example, there's a very nice data set in Europe that is actually measuring the quality of government. This is a data set that is provided by the Gothenburg University in Sweden, and it's an index. So, and what I like about the index is that it's based on surveys in all European regions, and they ask local citizens about the quality of public services that are provided in their region. Right, so it's about public education, public health, all of that, and citizens assess those in those surveys. Corruption is also part of this index. So you have a quality of government index, and you can actually see, okay, so the more blue the region is, the higher you score on this quality of government. The more red, the lower you score on this quality of government, right? So, and you can actually see again that there are huge differences across regions in Europe. So it really might matter a lot if you implement a smart specialization strategy in a region that has a high quality of government, because you would expect that the chance that this policy will deliver is much higher when the quality of government is there. Well, if you're going to implement smart specialization strategies in a region where there's a lot of corruption and where quality of government in general is very low, then it might not deliver. And therefore, you might not expect too much effects of smart specialization strategies. So it's important where those smart specialization strategies are actually being implemented, because that might have an effect on the effectiveness of smart specialization strategies. And you can actually see that there are huge differences in Europe in that respect. You can think about many institutions, right? So quality of government is just one of them. You might also have all kinds of social capital indicators. That is more about the capacity of society to make connections within social group, but also between social groups. As I said before in my first slide, smart specialization strategy is a decentralized policy approach. So you involve local stakeholders, and they are going to prioritize the activities they want to invest in their smart specialization strategies. Now, if you have a low degree of social capital, that might not work too much, because there might not be really a culture of collaboration in those regions. So local stakeholders might not pop up in those sessions when they think about their smart specialization strategies. Or there is a lot of corruption, and the vested players might have a big influence of what is going to be written down in those smart specialization strategies. So it actually might matter a lot. So institutions and policies are very important in this respect. Now, also, and this is something I have been working on, and I can't really show too much empirical results yet, but I think, and I just want to share this idea with you, and I'm very happy to hear any feedback on that, is that I'm also thinking about what is the feasibility of certain specific policies in certain specific regional context. So this sounds very abstract, I know, but I think it makes sense from a kind of institutional perspective, because it depends very much on the type of policies that have been implemented in the past, what type of policies you can actually effectively adopt in a particular context. And just to make an example, is just one study I found so far that is actually thinking along similar lines. And this is a study by the World Bank. It's just a working paper. It has not yet been published in a scientific journal. It's just a working paper. And this is on climate policy. So climate policy can consist of many different types of policy instruments, right? So here you see a network. You see on the left side, you see a network. You see a lot of nodes in that network. And each node stands for a policy instrument on climate change, right? So on the top, for example, you see removal of fossil fuel subsidies, right? That's one policy instrument that you can think of in climate change policy. But there are many, in this data set these authors have analyzed, they have about more than 40 different policy instruments. And they have a data set on more than 100 countries. And they can follow those countries for over a period of 40 years. I had no idea that a data set of that kind was available, but apparently there is. And for all those 40 policy instruments, countries adopt those policies or not. And you can follow those countries for over a period of 40 years. Now, in this network, why there is a network and why there is a link between two policy instruments, if two instruments are being combined at the country level at a high frequency, so that combination happens a lot inside the country, those policies might have something in common. It's not really clear what that really is, but that combination, when that combination is often found, they might have something in common. And what they have in common really is still a thing that needs further research. But they found really striking patterns, right? So you can actually see that if there's a node on top of that network and one node down on that network, they are never being combined in any country, right? Well, the ones that are very close to each other in this network, those policy instruments are often combined at the country level, and therefore, and that's what you find in this data analysis. Now, why would I care about this? Well, because it might be the case that a region might have just maybe 3 policy instruments and is thinking about, hey, I want to add a new policy instrument. So I want to, let's say I want now the next step in my climate change policy will be removal of fossil fuel subsidies. Well, they have just a few policy instruments down in this network. So that one is completely disconnected from the 3 policy instruments that they already have. Now, what these authors actually find is that you move into that policy instrument just on top is very unlikely when you have adopted 3 policy instruments that are down in that network. So it means that maybe, and this is food for further thinking and also an input for further research, is first of all, what they explain is if you look at countries and when they adopt a new policy instrument, it's very much a path-dependent process. So what they conclude after a very thorough empirical analysis is that countries are more likely to introduce policies that are complementary to the prior policy experiences. So they don't make jumps in their portfolio of policy instruments. They follow a kind of sequence in which they don't depart too much from the policy instruments they have done in the past. And this might make sense, but still kind of puzzle why that is. Yeah, so I'm very open about that, but I think it's an interesting outcome. Now, if we think about smart specialization policy, you might also have many instruments in smart specialization policy. You might have R&D subsidies, or you build new infrastructure, or all of that. There are many demand-side policy instruments, supply-side policy instruments that you can think of. I already have a data set on that with about 50 different types of instruments across different regions in Europe. And so far I haven't done the analysis yet, but I will do so very soon from now. And I just want to see and try to apply this idea, and we see some kind of general pattern, similar patterns, right? So it actually means that if you have regional innovation policy and you have, for example, be very supply-driven policy, it would be much harder for you to go into demand-led policies, because you have no prior policy experience in that, and therefore it might not be that probable that you go into that. But if you even might go into that, that policy instrument might not be that successful, because it disconnects from the existing policy experience you have accumulated in the past. Now, this is thinking out loud, right? So I'm very honest about that, but I think it's an interesting exercise to see to what extent, if we think about smart specialization policies, and there are a lot of instruments, policy instruments that are part of that, to what extent there is a kind of mixture of those policy instruments that makes sense in some regions but not in other regions. So it implies that there is no one-size-fits-all policy. It depends very much on the set of policy mixes that you have accumulated in the past. It provides you with opportunities to move into new policy instruments, but it might also set limits to what you can actually achieve in moving into policy instrument. Again, it's an idea, has not yet been tested, but I think it's worth to try out and test that empirically. If that's the case, then there are also limits to the policy learning. We often say that in the literature, but here you would really have very systematic analysis if that would be the case. Because you cannot just apply a policy everywhere. It depends very much on the context of policies that you have accumulated in the past. And my last suggestion would be that some places might have more policy options than other places, right? If you just have, for example, if you don't do any climate change policy, and there are some countries and some regions that have the tendency to do so, then they don't have that many policy options at the same time, right? Well, if you already, for example, there are Nordic countries like Sweden, they already have almost all policy instruments in place in climate policy. And that gives them a lot of opportunities to experiment and to move into other new policies because they have accumulated so much policy experiences that they can actually do that experimentation. While other countries that have hardly any policy track record in that respect, they might also have very limited possibilities to experiment and to move into new policies. Again, it's thinking out loud. And let's see to what extent that is actually the case. I just want to finish here by just making a few conclusions. What to me it tells, learning from the smart specialization policy strategies in Europe, is that history should matter in regional innovation policy, right? Not anything goes. You have to make evidence-based choices in terms of the priorities you set. Right? Depends on your capabilities, give you opportunities, but set also limits. You have to choose carefully your collaboration partners, right? It's not just by not by enhancing collaboration, but you really have to choose carefully your collaboration partners. And I was making the point about specific policies. History might matter also in that respect, which policies might be more feasible in some context as compared to other contexts. And this will be my last slide. What I also find, especially in Europe, is that we have many opportunities that remain unexploited. We have many regional capabilities in Europe that are not being activated and that are not being used in order to move into new directions. Second, which I showed with those of you try to show with these European maps, complementary capabilities outside the regions are poorly used in Europe. Also, missed opportunity, lot of untapped potential. And this is still a bit speculative, relevant policy options in regions remain unexploited. It's just a hypothesis I have, has not yet been tested, but I would like to move into that direction. Last, why you have untapped potential? There might be many reasons for that. There are many bottlenecks that you could think of, like weak science-industry relationships, right? So you might have scientific excellence in something, but it is not being exploited economically speaking because of poor science-industry relationship. There might be not too much entrepreneurship. There are capabilities available, but are not being exploited because entrepreneurs do not take this up and transform them into new businesses. There might be a lack of venture capital, right? So you might have perfect capabilities, but if there's no funding available, it will not come into being. There might be lack of local demand, as I said, weak institutions, low quality of governance. Those are all kinds of prerequisites in order to make this happen, in order to exploit those capabilities in those smart specialization strategies. And to me, this is something what smart specialization strategies should really focus on. Try to remove those bottlenecks in order to exploit the many opportunities that are available in regions, but we also have seen that the opportunities that regions have differ a lot between regions. And again, bringing back the experience of Extremadura, not many opportunities to diversify. It makes you really think about, what type of smart specialization policy would actually work in that type of context, in which that is very difficult. All right, thank you for your attention.
But I'll start with the most depressing one. Because I thought I'll bring you from Netherlands and you will make us happy because you're not from America at the moment. And instead, it seems that you sort of depressed everyone. So let me start with the most depressing set of questions, and they are basically going straight at whether this whole smart specialization actually offers anything. Because you spend a lot of time showing us that if a region is already successful, it has everything that it needs to diversify. It has already complex activities. It already has good governance, and it has social capital. So it can decide what to do in smart specialization, and it's wonderful. If, on the other hand, you're in the wrong place in Spain, well, smart specialization offers you basically nothing. So Darius and I teach a course about global innovation policy. And last week, we talked about social capital. So the critique of social capital, like Robert Putnam, for example, he goes to Italy, show us in every empirical details that you might have to have that social capital is basically manna from heaven. If you have social capital, you will spend time in Torino and will have a great life. If you don't, nothing is going to work. And then people say, okay, so how do I get that social capital? And his answer was, well, in the 11th century, you shouldn't be under the kingdom of. That's not very helpful. So a question is, let's assume for a moment before I go to the other set of really depressing questions, that smart specialization actually makes sense. What can we do to actually help regions that are not the Ile-de-France of Europe?
Yeah, also no. Yeah. Now, of course, that's working. Yeah.
That's of course a key question, right? So, well, okay. So, if I do this type of exercise, okay. So for example, with Extremadura, right? This is
So let me give you two examples that I know of. I started my research in the late 90s, and I had to read book after book which explained to me how Ireland will forever be poor because they have zero social capital, they have zero capabilities, they depend on FDI, they know nothing of how to do, and they never gain any capabilities. And actually, in your map, they don't look very good in some of the issues, like governance. I think it was sort of orange. And yet, mysteriously, it's one of the richest, most successful regions in Europe. We go to Finland, and Darius once showed me a wonderful slide about Nokia and smart specialization and what we should expect if Finland was in smart specialization, that we will have, what was it, the best toilet paper on earth, but more or less nothing else. Yeah, paper and pulp and paper. And yet Finland is not known for pulp, at least the best toilet paper on earth.
I never look at my toilet paper, where it comes from.
And I think the Finnish realized that and instead said that they shouldn't smart specialize, they should develop completely new capabilities. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So how many time do you have?
Okay. As I said, I have a lot of really interesting questions here.
No. Okay. So, no, of course, those are crucial comments. Okay, Extremadura. Let's go back just to a simple example, right? So the graph actually showed that there are very few opportunities that Extremadura had. If you really go into detail, you use also other data. So these were industry data. I also used occupational data and technological data. So you cover many dimensions of capabilities, right? Because industry data is just, okay, so there are limitations using that as well. And what we find if we combine all those three types of capabilities, right? So there are a few opportunities in Extremadura that they can actually take on, right? So, and this is, I think, the idea about smart specialization policy, right? So that carefully analyze what you have, try to exploit opportunities that you can identify, and even in the worst regions, you can always find some opportunities that you can actually focus on. So I'm not too much worried about that. But of course, it's not Ile-de-France, right? And I think and it's good to make that distinction that Extremadura is not like Ile-de-France. Secondly, and I think it was part of my last slide. What smart specializations policy is also doing is try to tackle those bottlenecks that might be one of the reasons why those regions might not take off, not being able to exploit those capabilities. Now, you're right. So there might be a lack of social capital, there might be weak governance, etc., etc. So many of the smart specialization strategies have actually focused on that, how to improve governance in those regions, because that turned out to be, I mean, you can think about moving into something new, but if the fundamentals are not right, and this is one of the fundamentals, is there good governance? Well, let's try to improve that first in order to make, and then make the next step, right? So again, it's very much regional specific. You identify opportunities, but also the bottlenecks that prevent them from benefiting from those opportunities, and try to tackle those. So each smart specialization strategy should there be very different. So I still think it makes absolutely sense. Still, you're right. Of course, the Ile-de-France regions and many regions, they have many more opportunities, so they benefit most from that. So, but But there are some opportunities also for the most lacking regions, and they should exploit that as well. But of course, you won't expect them in 10 or 15 years to catch up with Ile-de-France, right? So, and that's a fact of life. And I think it is good to incorporate that in policy and not then come to another conclusion, is that, oh yeah, there are little opportunities in Extremadura. Now let's then go for AI. But yeah, it will be very difficult to do. But if we succeed in doing that, we can become the next island, maybe. I don't think that. So in a way, you try to think about, okay, what if you have to invest tax money somewhere, you want to go for low-hanging fruits, right? Because, as I said, the cost might be much lower, and this, the probability that you will be successful in that type policy might be much higher when you go for those low-hanging fruits. You might still decide about moving into something completely different if you are desperate enough, right? So I showed that actually some regions might be actually trapped and might have to do something completely different. But then this framework then tells you that that might be very hard to do, and that it requires massive investments in order to compensate for the lack of capabilities they have in those activities.
So let's move, as I said, from depression to depression. And follow that line of thought. And we have at least 3 questions that more or less follow the same line of thought. And that is, you talk about relatedness, and it might be true. But if you keep on going in relatedness, you actually might end up in basically a dead end of relatedness. So we have a common friend, Gernot Garmer, who became really, really famous when he showed exactly that on the rural regions. And that is, if you have an industry which is in a dead end for you, and you just keep on trying to become relatedness, you end up with the best, completely no future related industry, and you end up in a dead place. So why should we focus so much about relatedness? How does that actually help us? Why not open our mind and look for other things?
Oh yeah, you can do that, but I disagree here. Just let me give you a very concrete example, right? So many regions are thinking about moving into green, right? So, and then we can have the same type of capabilities argument, and we're going to say, do you really have the capabilities to move into green? If so, yes. If not, maybe you should leave it to other regions. Now, there have been a number of empirical studies, and I've done myself for one of those, is that in regions where you have what has been referred to in the literature as dirty activities, right? So let's say the non-renewables, right? So many regions might have a lot of capabilities in non-renewables, and it will allow them to move into renewables because the capabilities in non-renewables are still very useful and relevant to move into renewables. So you might say, hey, this is a radical change because you go from dirty to green, but the underlying capabilities is a relatedness story, right? So you can actually use relevant capabilities to move into something completely new. And it is not necessarily that you get stuck into something. Yes, there are regions, the rural area is a good example, right? That you might become over-specialized, as Gernot mentioned that. But then to me, the question is still, to what extent those capabilities that in the rural area would be still useful and relevant to move into something new. Now you can build those networks. And for a steel region, it's not that difficult to move into something else using the relatedness argument, because you can actually see in a network that you have actually a lot of opportunities to move from still into something related, which is new and would bring new economic life to the region. Now, for coal mining region, that is a bit more of a problem, right? Because then you might get stuck into coal mining, and there are many coal mining regions. And why coal mining regions are really struggling? Because the capabilities in coal mining are not useful or relevant for almost any activity to move into. And then you might have this issue indeed that through the relatedness argument, they might not be able to restructure their economy, and they really have to think about moving into something completely different. But that, I think, that is still then evidence-based. You have looked in those regions for any low-hanging fruits. You didn't find one, and then you say, hey, yeah, you have to make a jump. You have no other choice, right? So you have to, you're super trapped. You have become locked in, and therefore now you need to develop something completely new. And that means massive investments in every respect, in research, in education, in new companies, etc., etc. It will be very hard to do, but that might indeed the only option available, right? So, but again, the reason why it is very hard to do is that you cannot rely on existing capabilities, right? So it's still very much in line with the framework.
So let's move to slightly more optimistic, especially since we're running out of time, but still I found a little depressing. So we have this EU project that is trying to create a big Europe and move people around, and all Europeans, as you know, should talk to each other, and you could be professors in other rest, and then you show us the graphs. But how long is this project that you have been running in Europe now?
You mean the collaboration?
No, the EU thing. It's what? It's not that young, right?
No.
And yet the collaboration that you showed us is completely and utterly national when, as you said, everybody, let's assume that they're not stupid, know that international collaboration can help them. What is it that has not already been tried in Europe that can make European, let's forget the Chinese and the US, just European to talk to other European that don't speak exactly the same language and preferably don't live next door?
No, that to me is obvious a thing where smart specialization strategies did not deliver. Right, so this was already implemented to some extent since 2014, but it was only intensified, this type of policy, since 2020. So okay, we are now in 2025. Don't expect too many results so far, but I know in the first programming period from 2014 to 2020. Regions were just struggling with it. Where do I find my collaboration partner? Well, you can imagine if you are a regional policymaker in Krakow, in Poland, and then Brussels will tell you, yeah, you have to specify with whom you're going to collaborate, right? So, okay, you want to go into biotech? Tell me, and then they think, well, okay, we just mentioned a few regions that are strong in biotech, and that's it, right? So, but that is not the story. The story is where are the complementarities, right? So I think for sure in the first programming period, but also in the second program period, regions had no idea with whom they collaborate. I think this is just very recent literature that they could actually use. And we provide them with all the information. I'm doing these studies for European regions, and I actually tell them with which organization in the region they should connect, because I have the data. Even the individuals. I mean, so let me give you one example.
If you can add an optimistic note, that would be great.
But it was not a region, but it was a company. And that was the company L'Oréal, cosmetic company. And they came to us and they heard about the framework and they said, yeah, we were thinking about the next frontier in cosmetics, and we want you to analyze that. And then I tell you, well, I have no clue whatsoever what cosmetic is, let alone that I know what will be the new tendencies in the next coming years. But said, no, but we want you to use that framework, and we think still can be useful. Okay, so we did the analysis, right? So, and there I really could see how powerful that can be, right? So we are talking about a big company in which you have a lot of researchers. They do a lot of research and development. There are about 6,000 only in L'Oréal that are doing research on this. And now I had to tell them in what direction to go. So I went to the headquarters in Paris, super nervous, because there would be all the experts, and I would tell them in what direction they should go. And they loved it, right? There were all the experts there because they don't think in those type of terms. And I must say, I was quite surprised by that. But they thought it was very useful and very relevant. And what was a very concrete outcome is that we did the analysis for globally. So we had every organization and every individual that actually mattered in cosmetics, and we could actually see what type of capabilities L'Oréal was missing, but that they should take on board in order to move into the new generation of cosmetics. We could actually see that in the data. And then we could actually tell them, yeah, you have to connect to those companies, but you can also have to connect to those individuals that have those capabilities that you don't have yourself. And we just gave them a list, in this case, of inventors. And some of them were working in Japan, some of them were working in China, some of them working in Africa, some of them working in Latin America. And of course, when you analyze patents, I mean, there's just the address of the inventor. So we just gave them, okay, these are the top 100 inventors in this field, and we specified which inventor to connect to, and they just recruited them. Right? So it's not only about to which region to connect, but even to which organization or to which individual. And I can tell that to policymakers. And taking this example of a company that thought that was very useful, I think, no, this might actually work, right? So and we provide the information. I mean, they do with the information whatever they like, but we just tell them where are the opportunities, which collaboration partners can actually mean something to the objectives that you have described yourself in your smart specialization policy. And we are just there. To help and to provide them with that information, and they can ignore it. That's up to them, but the information is there.
Good.
And that was not the case in the first programming period, and also part of the second programming period. So I'm not sure whether the national bias of interregional collaborations will go away, because of course there are strong reasons for why that is the case, right? Because in your own region you speak the same language, you have the same norm and values, so it's easier to collaborate, all of that. But it might be not the wisest partners or the most strategic partners for you that will deliver.
So first, thank you. And also a positive note. Now understand why it's important to do social science research and actually get data, so you can tell companies and policymakers what to do.
And they pay well.
He said that. Thank you so much. And we're very happy with you.